Okay, good evening, everybody. First of all, my thanks to all the panelists, distinguished panelists who have taken time off on Diwali Eve, and some of you might be missing a Team Patti session or some other session. And I know there are so many discussions going on. We have done number of discussions on India, US. We have even done a discussion on Ukraine, Afghanistan. But I think charity begins at home. We should do neighbors. We are starting a series having discussions with India, Nepal, India, Bhutan, India, Pakistan, and so on. So we will keep on really offering you viewpoints. As this is not any Sarkari think tank, we can be expecting our panelists to be very frank and candid. And I must say that you all have equal time, so there is no interruption like Arnab Goswami or anybody else. You will have 10 minutes uninterrupted time. I have no pretensions of being an expert on Nepal. I have really been watching and hearing and reading comments and articles by you all. And whatever little, sometime we are invited to ICW when we have Sharma Oli coming or somebody else is coming, then we listen and watch the other side of the story. But there is a lot which we can learn from our distinguished panelists. So without further ado, I will turn to Ranjit Rai. I hope he's still there. Ranjit, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
So I will begin with you because you told me you have just come back, so you are freshest, and otherwise also you are ambassador not too long ago, just a few years back. So as an ambassador, I'm sure you interacted and really dealt with the political leadership as well as the leader of opposition parties. And you must have also traveled across the country, not on mules like Mr. Rasgotra, but at least in your car and jeep, and met many different walks of life people. So give a sense, give an overview in 10 minutes, take into account the political, the economic, the defense, security angles, and what's going on, because though we talk about civilizational relations, we have all kind of connections with Nepal. And it's still, I don't think one can really say that we are the warmest, closest friends. Over to you, Ranjit.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador Surendra Kumar, and happy Diwali to all our friends who are in this program. I just got back from Nepal. I spent a week there and I met a lot of people. You know, this is election season. Next month, there are going to be national elections. So there's a lot of political activity going on. But just stepping aside from that a little bit, I'll come to it later. I really think that right now we are in a sweet spot in the relationship between India and Nepal. You know, last couple of years, there have been a lot of ups and downs. But currently, I think we're in a very happy situation. And I say that for several reasons. You know, first, we've had two back-to-back visits at prime ministerial level. Prime Minister Deuba was here. A month later, Prime Minister Modi went to Lumbini. And these were very substantive visits. After that, we've had the visit of the head of the Maoist party. You know, this is the other partner in the ruling coalition, Pushpa Kamar Dahal. He was invited by the BJP president, Mr. Nadda. You know, a very important element of all these visits has been this cooperation in the energy sector. And, you know, this has really been the high point of the relationship in the last few months. The two governments have signed a vision statement on energy, and not only have they signed it, it is being implemented. And India is buying energy from Nepal on the spot market, and India is also agreeable to the development of a sub-regional energy market, which means Nepal could sell energy to Bangladesh through India. And this is a huge development. In the last few months alone, during the rainy season, Nepal has earned hundreds of crores worth of energy from energy exports. And, you know, this is also going to address a long-standing problem in the bilateral relationship, which is the trade deficit that Nepal has vis-a-vis India. And just to give you an idea of the magnitudes that we are talking about, Indian public sector companies are developing 3,200 megawatts of energy in Nepal. And if you include Pancheshwar, which is a G2G project, that's another 5,000 megawatts. 8,200 megawatts means an investment of something like 10 billion US dollars into Nepal in the next few years. I mean, this is really a mind-boggling sum. And when these projects come online, can you imagine the amount of energy trade we will have between the two countries and the enormous integration that this hydropower cooperation will lead between the two economies? I mean, already the two economies are pretty closely tied in, but I think energy trade, looking at it from Nepal's perspective, is going to be a huge money spinner. So this is a very, very positive development. Coming now to the elections, which are going to be held next month. These are the provincial and the central elections. So basically, there are three possibilities or three ways that the elections can go. One is, of course, the ruling coalition wins. The second is that, it's a very close call between the ruling coalition and the main opposition coalition, which is headed by Mr. KP Oli of the UML. And depending on the outcome of the result, you will have various permutations and combinations in terms of who forms the government. They tried an experiment earlier of merging all the left parties together and having a left coalition. It didn't last very long. The Chinese are reportedly behind this and are still working to have some sort of unity between leftist parties. So it'd be interesting to see what the result is going to be. My sense is that the ruling coalition might perhaps emerge on top. And the impression I have from the Maoists, and I think this is the message that they have conveyed to the political leadership in Delhi, that there will be no surprises for India in terms of how the Maoists are going to respond. So, let's wait and see what happens. Despite the ups in the relationship, this is not to say that there are no irritants. I mean, there are major issues, major problems in the relationship which haven't gone away. You have the whole boundary dispute. This is a very difficult issue to resolve. You have the debate around the 1950 treaty. There was a report of the eminent persons which has not been endorsed or which has not been accepted, particularly by the government of India. And most recently is the whole issue around the Agniveers. We have changed the system of recruitment of Jawans into the army, and this will impact recruitment of Gorkhas from Nepal. And the Nepalese authorities are in a big dilemma. And my informal consultation suggests that, given the fact that Nepal has seen this terrible Maoist insurgency for many years, there are still some extremist left-wing groups. They're very worried after 4 years of service in the Indian Army, when these Agniveers come back to Nepal, they're well-trained in armaments. What will happen? Will they get integrated into society, or will they go and join some of these extremist groups? So this is a very major worry for the Nepalese. And the decision they have taken is that they have stopped recruitment of the Agniveers for the present and said that the new government should really decide on what is to be done. I hope very much that this really historical 200-year-old relationship between Nepal and India through the Gorkhas continues. Coming to the domestic economic situation, there was a lot of debate in India that Nepal is the next Sri Lanka. This is certainly not the case. Nepal is not Sri Lanka. Of course, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has affected everybody in terms of higher prices for food, fertilizers, fuel. There is very high inflation. The Nepalese rupee, which is tied to the Indian rupee, has collapsed. From 100 Nepali rupees to $1, it has now become 130 Nepali rupees to $1. And Nepal is extremely dependent on imports. The bulk of their consumption is through imports. So, all this has certainly negatively affected the economy, and their foreign exchange reserves shrank by a very significant amount. But there are silver linings to the clouds. The tourism is picking up, the remittance earnings are picking up. So the situation is not so dire. But one spin-off of what has happened in Sri Lanka is very interesting. because the perception in Nepal is that, the Sri Lanka crisis is caused by this huge debt that they have, and that the Chinese debt is one important factor. And so the Nepalese have told the Chinese quite bluntly. They told the foreign minister of China, they told the head of the International Relations Department of the Chinese Communist Party when they visited Nepal. They've told them that as far as the Belt and Road Initiative projects are concerned in Nepal, they would like grants. They do not want loans. So these projects would go ahead if the Chinese are willing to give them grants, but not otherwise. And some of these projects are really big ticket items, like the railway from Tibet to Nepal. These are in billions of dollars. And I really don't see the Chinese giving them grants, for these huge projects. So until and unless something really changes dramatically in Nepal, I suspect that the implementation of some of these big ticket projects will be pushed back. And it's not very likely that they'll happen in the near future. The last issue I wanted to discuss was, the geopolitical tensions, and especially the US-China contestation for influence globally. And this is also happening in Nepal. And there was this very acrimonious debate in Nepal on the MCC. This is the Millennium Challenge Corporation grant. This was a $500 million grant that the Americans were giving to Nepal for development and maintenance of roads, for construction of transmission lines, which will evacuate power and facilitate export to India. Huge debate in Nepal. It was handled badly by the Americans also, who initially said, this is the economic aspect of the Indo-Pacific strategy. And the Nepalese are quite allergic to Indo-Pacific strategy and the Quad, because, they feel this is aimed against China. And China is a big player in Nepal. So the Nepalese don't want to have anything to do with Indo-Pacific strategy and Quad. And hence this MCC project became very, very controversial. And of course, the Chinese were working behind the scenes against it. There was a public spat between the Americans and the Chinese. So what has happened eventually is that this was endorsed by the parliament with some caveats. But, from India's perspective, we have seen a growing presence, influence of both the US and China in Nepal. And, this is something that we really need to be very cautious about. People tend to look at it in a very short-term perspective. India and US are good friends right now, and it's the US and China fighting it out in Nepal. It'll benefit us. But I think, politics can change, times can change. So we really need to be very careful and not allow a perception to grow that India is kind of less engaged or hands-off, which is the sense I got from meeting with, a lot of people in Nepal. And I think this is something that we really need to be conscious about. Last word about China. China has also burnt its fingers by intervening directly in Nepalese politics. I mentioned their efforts to patch up a coalition of left parties, to support the coalition-led government, which collapsed because of its own internal difficulties and rivalries between the main leaders. But that does not mean that this effort has stopped. I mean, the Chinese are long-term players. These efforts will continue. They want to see a left-oriented Nepal, which is aligned with China, which is aligned with the Chinese Communist Party. And this is something that obviously is of considerable concern to India and something that India should watch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ranjit. You have really given very optimistic and promising scenario, energy trade and $10 billion investment, and then also plague about China, which our Professor Kondapalli will also comment on that. I will turn to Professor S.D. Muni, who I think on panel is the most experienced person. He has been keeping a watch on Nepal for decades. And he knows inside out. He has seen all the evolution from kingdom to democracy and all the collapse of government and new government sworn in. Professor Muni, Ranjit paints a very promising scene, but we have seen so many times, and Prime Minister went to Kathmandu in 2014, a huge euphoria was generated. Every time you go to temples there, but after that, a few months, then whole thing really disappears. So with all your experience of decades, you have known leaders, you have known people. What is your take on what is the current state of India, Nepal? Is it really as optimistic as Ranjit says? Ranjit's book really talks about dilemma in Kathmandu, but is there no dilemma in New Delhi? Over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's a great opportunity. I know that the audience is busy with the Diwali and others, but that doesn't matter. In fact, I see this as a very great learning exercise with Mr. Mittar and Haran being around. I'm sure we will learn a lot about them. Let me put the whole thing in a perspective. To my mind, there are three determinants which shape India-Nepal dynamics. One is the domestic politics and turbulence which is there. Second is the way India approaches Nepal. And the third is the regional balance. Let us take one by one. The domestic turbulence is characterized by the consistent instability there. No prime minister has stayed there for up to 5 years. And even before that, that is what the situation is. It is a deeply polarized polity, ideologically, socio-culturally, economically. I can't go into the details because you give us only 10 minutes. Therefore,
2 more minutes.
Therefore, we will come to the discussion if there are specific questions. It is a fragmented polity with multiple political parties, ever shifting alignments. There are no consistencies either ideologically or in any sense in the alliances which are there, except for the search for power. And that is the main issue which is there. And thirdly, India is a great polarizing factor in Nepali politics. We are seen as a divider. We are not seen as a uniter. And that's largely because we have also been shifting our support and alliances with various factors which are there. So this is how the domestic politics is today, which, as Ranjit said very clearly, is caught into elections. And let us see what the outcome of the elections is. Second factor to my mind is the way India responds to Nepal. And there I will say things which are not very palatable to many. But first of all, I find that India often reacts, or India's approach is adhocist, insensitive, and highly personalized. You want to take personalized approach, and you emphasize that we should talk more after 2014. Let me underline some of the factors. The Indian leadership got very unhappy with the Janakpur meeting not being allowed to them. And direct contact between Indian leadership and the Tarai was denied. And therefore, there were a lot of disappointment here. That disappointment resulted in our disappointment with the way they were unfolding their constitution. But in a very undiplomatic manner, we intervened at a time when the constitution had been adopted by the Constituent Assembly in 2015. Now, no country would accept that kind of an intervention, but we made that intervention. Prime Minister's special envoy, Dr. Jaishankar, as a foreign secretary, was sent there, and he said, hold on your constitution for a week and bring about the changes. That's not done. When that did not happen, we had a kind of economic blockade through which we generated a tremendous amount of anti-Indian nationalism in Nepal, which was cashed in politically by Mr. Oli, and which is we are going to pay for it for coming decades. It's not going to, because small children could not go to school. Women could not have their kitchen gas. There are all kinds of problems. Almost every section of the society got completely alienated with the way we dealt with it. That anti-Indian nationalism, I think, to some extent continues. And we will see in a very subtle way in present elections. Because we saw at the time of precipitating the border dispute on Kalapani, which was a continuation of it. They have put it now in constitution. We can't find an easy solution to that. Therefore, we are going to see these egoistic reactions of the leadership on both the sides, both India and Nepal, that relations have looked to be very spoiled. There are other problems with our approach to Nepal. One is what you call a delivery deficit. The gap between our promise and delivery, which is institutionally inbuilt into Indian foreign policy making. Then there are diverse kind of stakeholders. The ministries do not have a proper coordination on Nepal. Not all ministries are taking a strategic view. Then there is a kind of a bordering states which have their own stakes. The army has its own stakes. Religious leaders have their own stakes. Very highly placed Indians who are married into Nepal have their own stakes in terms of opinion making and others. And that complicates the whole situation. Therefore, New Delhi leadership policy is never made either by embassy or by the ministry. There are all kind of other factors creep into it, and they make a policy which is inconsistent, which is ad hocist. Of course, we give priority to security. Of course, we have a preference for democratic forces in Nepal. But we have made compromises both on security as well as the democratic preferences. And this is the problem which we really have with our relationship. Again, I'll go into details if there are specific questions. The third factor is regional imbalance. The extra regional powers have always constrained India in Nepal. During the Cold War, it was US by and large. I have seen statements after statements. And after the Cold War, now China has emerged as a big power. Nepal naturally leans on the bigger power, or one which has a greater muscle, both economic and military. And now, therefore, we see China, Nepal tilting towards India, tilting towards China. But that's a perception, I think, that should not be taken very far. Now, for China, China always was willing to come at the request of India's neighbors to pose as a counterbalance. Always. From 40 onwards, particularly after 60 onwards. But now, since the beginning of this century, China has its own agenda. China wants to push itself into South Asia for very different Chinese reasons. And again, I want to go into details, but because of the time, I'm restraining myself. Now, because China has stakes in South Asia, China has stakes in Nepal also. And that's why China is pushing itself in all directions, in all dimensions. Economically, China is going through BRI and what you call the Himalayan corridor, in which they are linking up Nepal with Afghanistan and Pakistan. This is what their effort is. Economically, therefore, they have a lot of funds offered. There are problems with BRI, as Ranjit hinted at that, but this is the great attraction which they are there. Now, besides economically, China is using its soft power in terms of emphasis on Buddhism, emphasis on language, through Confucius institutions, and by taking all kind of jaunts for the journalist and anybody who is willing to go to China for a trip and trying to cultivate their constituencies. Thirdly, they are directly politically interfering. Again, Ranjit says they are trying to consolidate communist power center. They have utterly failed so far. They tried to do it once. Now they have failed because there is a huge split. But they'll continue to do that. And even after elections, I think they will make very serious efforts to bring the communist parties together. So how things happen, we will have to see that. Now, this is where the Chinese are posing a direct challenge to India's strategic space in Nepal. What can India do? I think we must assert our security interest. Secondly, we must use our cultural diplomacy not by a Hindu state idea. It's not going to work. It is unfortunate, but there are constituencies in the present regime which want to push this idea in a very serious manner. And with Hindu state, they also want to bring back monarchy. These are the serious no-no so far as Indian diplomacy is concerned. But what we should do is to improve our delivery deficit. We must improve our developmental role, and we must try and ensure that Nepali leadership is not unduly alienated. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Muni. As usual, you have lived up your reputation, calling a spade, not mincing any word. You have flagged so many things, delivery deficit or China trying to make a leftist state and cultural diplomacy. We will turn to Professor Kondapalli. Before that, let me welcome my friend Manji Puri is there. He has also changed his Nehru jacket. He was a red earlier, now he's in a different. Now, Professor Kondapalli is somebody who dreams dragon at night. He takes PLA for breakfast. He takes Bangi for lunch. He takes Xi Jinping for dinner. And in the thick or thin Chinese shark fin soup, he is all the time only 24/7, breathing in, breathing out, all China. So, Professor Kondapalli, you have heard so many references to China, what they want to do, whether Chinese will give grant or give loan to Nepal, whether they will create a leftist government there. I understand some of the communist leaders in Nepal, they used to live in India, some of them somewhere near Bengali market. But now you have Chinese ambassador looming large in Kathmandu and trying to be the mediator. So many points have been referred to China. And you are the best person to enlighten us. What is China doing and how far they can do? Culture diplomacy, I don't understand. Look, how can anybody in the world can have more cultural diplomacy prospects in Kathmandu than us? You just look around. I mean, your Lord Buddha was born there. Your even Sita, you have so many, and then you have Pasuputinath temple. I mean, so many things are there. So I don't know. Over to you, Professor Kondapalli.
Thank you, Ambassador Surendra Kumar. Very good evening to all of you. And let me also greet everyone on the eve of Deepavali. It is true that the Chinese influence has expanded substantially in the Kathmandu Valley. There is a lot of effort by China to influence various walks of life. Professor Muni also mentioned about Confucius Institute in Kathmandu, that is also influencing soft power. In addition, of course, being stakeholders in Lumbini project and various others. Let me background to all of this by suggesting since history is a major barometer in this. So China today also revives many of those historical images. The Sino-Nepalese War of 1789 to 92, or the second one, which ended in a stalemate in 1856 with the Tapatali Treaty. Sometimes these were invoked as ways to say that China had historical contacts with Nepal. But the fundamental interest of China in Nepal is initially on Tibet, because Tibet has roughly about 22 out of the 30 counties dependent on Nepal trade because of the pretty far distances that Tibet has with mainland China in various periods in the 50s. But that is also a major problematic for Nepal, because after the Dalai Lama's flight in 59, much of this has been shut down. And while Nepal had mentioned that Tibet is an inalienable portion of China, which meant increasingly for the Chinese that they can take liberties to go into China and chase away the Tibetans or their ballot boxes during the elections that they conduct regularly. There is a heavy pressure on the Tibetans. So roughly we used to get about 5,400 Tibetan refugees into Kathmandu through the Kodari Road every year. Now that has been reduced to about 240 odd, and the Dalai Lama's office there generally pays about $250 or so, and gets them into the either Nepal, Bhutan, or India, Darjeeling, Dharamshala, Leh, or other areas. So this is a contentious issue between China and Nepal, and to the satisfaction of China, so far Nepal has been able to help the Chinese in this regard on Tibet. However, with the COVID-19 breakdown in 2020, many districts have been shut down, border districts have been shut down. Many Nepalese students who are studying in China were also stranded, like the Indian students were stranded. And this became a contentious issue. Although Wang Yi, during his March visit this year, said they will accommodate the Nepalese, but they have not been able to do so. But this also is, COVID-19 is also a concern because of the kind of border controls they made. It has resulted in border trade getting scuttled, with which Nepal is heavily dependent on. So this is one. But an attendant one is while the territorial dispute has been resolved in 1961, the Chinese today are creating well-off society villages. They built 624 of them, but also in the Nepal areas where the border has actually been settled down. But in some districts like Humla and Sankuwa Sabha or Rasua, Sindhu Palchok, in these places it is said that they have grabbed about 36 hectares of land in these 4 districts and been building some infrastructure. And in Humla, the district officer has complained about the Chinese structures that are being built. So this has now become a contentious issue. Let me go back again to the previous period when the King Birendra announced the Zone of Peace proposal, and that formulated a balance against India to counter the 1950 treaty between the two countries. And today, China is active in promoting the Himalayan Quad or Himalayan regional grouping, with Nepal supporting China, both in the acquiring SAARC membership, as well as in terms of the separate grouping like this Himalayan grouping. So 4 meetings of this has taken place, along with, of course, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and others. But I agree with Ambassador Ranjit that the Sri Lankan debt crisis has resulted in a lot of concern there. And so when the MCC, the Millennial Challenge Corporation, the agreement of $500 million was signed, ratified this February, the Nepalese suggested that they do not want loans, they do not want any other form of assistance, but they want the interest rates to be less than 2, and much like the IMF, World Bank, or ADB loans, they have to be standardized versions. That is because the Chinese never published the MOU between the two parties, in general in the Belt and Road Initiative projects, and hence this concern, given the Hambantota reality, the Nepalese have been insisting with the Chinese that they need FDI rather than loans. And if the loans have to be factored in, then it has to be a standardized version rather than something under the table. That is partly also because of the Buddhagandak project that has been stalled for over a long period of time. And the Nepalese Parliament Senate had accused one of the former Deputy Prime Minister's wife of taking a lot of bribes in this project. So there is also the concern that China is promoting corruption among the Nepalese politicians. But most important, the The railway line from Shigatse to Kathmandu is to cost around $56 billion. And if the Nepalese GDP is less than $20 billion, then it is quite a big issue for Nepal to reimburse all that $56 billion if the railway line is to be constructed. So this is the where the MCC comes into the picture. And the Nepalese concerns here. So there is no headway in many of the BRI projects. Although, of course, the Arnika Highway, the Bhaktpur, Gorkha, Narayan Ghat, Pokhara, Mustang, Kodari Road, all these were constructed way back in the 60s and 70s. And of course, the Chinese are also heavily involved in the Huawei telecom sector, ZTE, and let me say that the entire Nepalese telecommunications is in their hands at the moment, partly also because of these bribes and other things with the Nepalese politicians. In relation to India, there is the balancing that Nepal had done between China and India. And this has come to a precipitation during 1987 when Nepal purchased $200 million worth of small arms, and also that resulted in a blockade by India during Rajiv Gandhi Chandrasekhar time. And there is the second blockade in 2015 precipitated on the Madhesi agitation and others. Xi Jinping visited Kathmandu soon after the Chennai Connect in October 2019. That was the first visit after 23 years. They cobbled up a strategic partnership agreement, and as other speakers have mentioned, there is quite a flow from the International Liaison Department of the Communist Party to give them lectures, as well as from Wang Yi and other leaders. So that is the March visit, for instance, by Wang Yi. Wang Yi was warning the Nepalese foreign minister and others not to allow the American MCC $500 million grant. And the China International Development Corporation Agency, which is involved in 15 northern districts projects, they have also expressed some subtle kind of concerns in this regard. So just to summarize here, the Chinese effort to make inroads in Nepal has really succeeded. Soon after the earthquake in 2015-14, and they have built up various border posts, which of course have been shut down with the COVID-19 border protocols and others. Nevertheless, once the situation is improvised, we probably will see substantial Chinese inroads into Nepal. So let me just summarize this by saying, in 19th century, the British Indian government thought Tibet as the buffer zone. 20th century, not just Tibet gone, but also now Nepal has become a buffer zone with the Chinese inroads into Nepal. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kondapalli. You have given a very insight into what Chinese are doing and what Nepalese are up to. And I hope Nepal, you're saying it doesn't become case like Tibet, which disappeared as a buffer zone. And I hope our government is doing much more. Now I will turn to Manjeet Puri. Manjeet, you have heard Ranjit, you have heard Professor Muni, and you have heard Professor Kondapalli. And I am sure you have taken note of various points which they have stressed and also various perspectives. Now, you have been ambassador there not long ago, and I want to have a little different perception. What is the perception of India in eyes of an average Nepali? Does an average Nepali think of India as a great friend, somebody who really rushes to help, or they have different perception? Now, they have been referenced to the blockade. I remember when I was in London, that time first blockade to Rajiv Gandhi, and the entire British media was all talking about the big brother is squeezing the small brother, and the whole media really was thinking India was doing something unfair and unjust. Recently, Professor Muni also referred to how how much harassment, inconvenience caused to others. Other general criticism is that we have somehow succeeded in antagonizing the Tarai people as well as the center. The center think we are really coming too close to Tarai. Tarai think we really don't take care of their interests. So we have managed to do that. And there has been all this economic, promising economic deals, economic energy trade, which Ranjit was talking about. So Manjeet, I expect you to touch all these and also tell us something when we talk about all this beti roti ka rista. Do the Nepalese really feel very happy about it, or they really don't feel that this is something that they have to remind it again and again? Over to you.
Sir, thank you very much. And apologies that I joined a little late.
No.
Thank you also for so many of you being on the video, which showed to me that one can't be sitting in shirt sleeves. I might add something else, sir.
You have put the Prime Minister and other Nepali on the book. You have put.
Sir, वो भी मैंने आपके लिए लगाया कि देख लीजिएगा उसको, देखिएगा उसको. Sir, I see that the participants, at least what I can see here, I saw General Deepak Kapoor was there, but he's no longer there because that's a very important part that we should touch. Sir, आपने बहुत चीजें कही. मैं आपको एक छोटा सा चीज कह दूं, sir, if you don't mind, और मेरे को छोटा समझ के माफ कर दीजिएगा. सर, हम लोगों को इंडिया में एक बहुत, मैं मानता हूँ, ठीक आदत नहीं है कि नेपाल को एक मुफस्सल पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया की तरह ट्रीट करें. सर, अगर आप मेरे को थोड़ा सा ये अलाउ करें, आपने ये फंक्शन उत्तर प्रदेश इन्वेस्टमेंट फोरम या किसी की तरफ से किया. आपके सारे फंक्शन आईएफए की तरफ से होते हैं. आप समझ गए सर, ये बात जरा थोड़ी सी समझ जाए सर. ये 21वीं सदी है. We have moved a lot, and Nepal, let me tell you, small as a country, maybe in the context of India and China, is not a small country otherwise. In Europe, it would be one of the 3-4 largest countries. The flight from the east of Nepal to the west of Nepal is as much as Delhi to Bangalore. I mean, these are simple factors. For us, let me make a simple point. You know, India always since 1947 has been besotted with much more than its neighborhood. The non-aligned movement is a great example, etc., etc. And I understand where we come from. But sir, great powers have actually achieved greatness by ensuring that their neighborhood is hegemonistically under their general control. Nepal, in my opinion, is not just strategically absolutely the most critical country for us, but it is hegemonistically for India the most important country as we climb the global ladder. Sir, let's be very clear. The world hasn't changed. 200 साल पहले भी लोग यही हरकतें कर रहे थे, अब भी कर रहे हैं. अब परमाणु बम आ गए होंगे, जो मर्जी आ गया होगा, वो ही तौर तरीका. Professor Kondamali कुछ कह रहे थे about Tibet being the buffer state. Sir, let us have absolutely no doubt that the British Empire, of which India was a part, was the strongest military power seen on earth ever till then. 1947, 15th August, India was no successor to the British Raj. None whatsoever. The Indian army soldiers used to go around to Beijing and take Chinese on galas and make them walk around. हम कर सकते हैं सर. सर, ये चीज एकदम समझने जानी कि वो सिचुएशन बिल्कुल जमीन आसमान का उतर गया जिस दिन कि वो यूनियन जैक नीचे उतरा. अब कल क्या होगा ऋषि सुना कि मुझे नहीं पता, लेकिन अभी तक स्थिति ये है. ये जरा बातें सर समझ जानी चाहिए. We were basically a developing country. क्या हेजेमनी वगैरह की आप बात कर रहे हैं, वो समझ नहीं आ गई. अब इन द ईयर 2022 आप ये बातें कर रहे हैं. सर, कोशिश करिए कि जितना हो सकता है नेपाल रिमेन्स दिस बफर स्टेट. वो जनरल साहब यहाँ है नहीं, मैं तो ये कहूँ उनको, सबको ये कहूँ, अपने दोस्तों को, खासकर जो यहाँ बैठे हुए हैं. Do you know what it means to have 100 kilometers by 1500 kilometers as a buffer with your most important strategic, let me use the word, enemy? And you know, it isn't very simple to cross 100 kilometers of mountainous territory. Sir, this is one of the most important elements. Once you internalize this, your understanding of both Nepal and its importance for you will change. The Nepalese are a rent-seeking society, a rent-seeking polity more than anything else. Professor Muni बिल्कुल सही कह रहे थे. हर आदमी अपना पैसा देख रहा है, हर आदमी अपनी नौकरी बचा रहा है. ये Prime Minister Dioba sir became Prime Minister when I was Deputy Chief of Protocol. मैं जब एम्बेसडर था मैं कहता था सर आप कहाँ जाएंगे, मैं तो डिप्टी चीफ ऑफ प्रोटोकॉल से एम्बेसडर बन गया हूँ, अब आपका क्या होगा। लेकिन वो कहते नहीं, मुझे जोशी ने कहा 2 और बार बनूंगा, एक 5वीं बार बन चुके हैं, पता नहीं और क्या होगा। सर ये वो वैसी सोसाइटी है, उधर ना दीन है ना धर्म है, कुछ नहीं। लेकिन उन्होंने आज से नहीं सर, राजा के जमाने से, अंग्रेज शासन के जमाने से, द वन कार्ड दैट दे ऑलवेज प्लेड वाज कि हम इंडिया नहीं। सर शायद यहाँ लोगों को पता नहीं, 1897 में दरबार हुआ था दिल्ली में सर, क्वीन विक्टोरिया की 97th रेन में, उसमें भी नेपाली जो था हमारे प्रिंसेस के साथ नहीं बैठाया गया। जब 1911 का दरबार हुआ तो सवाल ही नहीं पैदा हुआ। सर ये चीजें हम क्या मैं बताऊं, हमारे लोगों को जरा अपने आप समझ आना। सो लेट्स ट्रीट इट दिस फॉरेन कंट्री नॉट मुफस्सल इंडिया। अगर रेलवेज का कोई प्रोजेक्ट करना है तो समस्तीपुर डिवीजन हैंडल करिए, क्यों कर रही है? कोई और डिवीजन ऐसी हैंडल करती है प्रोजेक्ट गल्फ में, रवांडा में, यहाँ। अरे सेंट्रल यूनिट करती हैं द बेस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस रन फॉर। सर एक टाइम था जब maybe you were a younger officer, and at least even before I joined the foreign service, the best Indian companies wanted to operate in Nepal. Today, no Indian company wants to go there, which is worth its salt. The reason is not that the returns are not good. The reason is it's hell of a lot of rigmarole. It's a lot of international competition. There's much more business opportunities in India. Things are tough. We need to try and move things forward. My other point I want to make to everyone is, and so therefore the main point I'm making is Nepal is critically important. I mean, let's always be besotted with the United States and China, but let's not forget you are what you are because you are what you are in your neighborhood. And Pakistan and Bangladesh don't count. Nobody considers you to have hegemonistic abilities over those countries. So just understand this, the way the world will look at it. इसीलिए मैं कई बार ये लोग बोलता हूँ, मुनी साहब हंसते हैं इसके बारे में, एकला चलो, अरे नेपाल के लिए ही, हमारे लिए यही तरीका है, और अमेरिका को वहां मत आने दीजिए। चाइना तो सर हमारा ज्योग्राफी है, व्हाट इज योर चॉइस। अंग्रेज भी चाइना के अगेंस्ट जूझते थे, लेकिन ये बाहर वाले शक्ति को वहां अंडर डाल दिए। सर काठमांडू में जाइए, यू विल बी अमेज्ड एट द नंबर ऑफ चर्चेज, और सारे गोरे चर्चेज नहीं है सर, साउथ कोरियन भी रन कर रहे हैं चर्चेज। कहीं भी जाइए, छोटे से छोटे गाँव में, तराई में जाइए, वहां बोर्ड लगे हुए हैं, कम टू साउथ कोरिया, लर्न कोरियन। वहां पर भी फेथ हाउसेज है, वो नाम है सर चर्चेस। मैं ये जगह है सिमी कोट, जहाँ से फ्लाइट जाती है कैलाश मानसरोवर, एक जगह हिलसा हुआ हेलीकॉप्टर जाता है, वहां से सबसे पास में। वहां पर मैं गया, किसी ने मुझे कहा यहाँ हॉस्पिटल नहीं है। वहां गया यार, वहां 4 क्रॉस मैंने देखे, तो मैंने वो विलेज एल्डर को पूछा, भाई साहब यहाँ तो 4 लगे हुए हैं। वो हंसने लग पड़ा, कहता जी आप बड़े नए हैं, ये फेथ हाउसेज है। सर वहां भी फेथ हाउस पहुंच गए, अस्पताल पहुंचा। ये रियलिटीज, और ये रियलिटीज है हमारे। We need to back up. Why? Because the vested interest on their part is only marginal. आपने मुझे पूछा what do they think of us? They take us for granted. We are in the pocket. जो मर्जी चाहिए, जो नहीं चाहिए, ये तो देंगे ही देंगे, कोई तरीका ही नहीं। लेकिन सर उनकी जो एस्पिरेशन है through globalization. Sir, till 1990, Nepalese didn't you get passports? No passports were issued. So rather than some Gorkha soldiers and some rich guys, nobody went overseas. India was the maximum people at sea. 1990 के बाद स्थिति टुडे ये है कि 25% ऑफ नेपाल पॉपुलेशन लिव्स ओवरसीज, और इंडिया में नहीं रहते। गल्फ में रहते हैं, साउथ ईस्ट एशिया में रहते हैं, अमेरिका में रहते हैं, स्पेन में रहते हैं, यूके में रहते हैं, सब जगह। हर आदमी के पास मोबाइल फोन है सर, वो नहीं, वो नोकिया 0, जो बेस्ट सेलफोन जिससे वो लोग वीडियो कॉल्स करते हैं एक दूसरे के। जब ये द्योबा एंड हिज वाइफ केम टू इंडिया इन 2017 में, उनके साथ कह रहा है हम लोग इन्फोसिस पे गए, तो उन्होंने 2 घंटे की प्रेजेंटेशन की एप्लीकेशन फॉर मोबाइल टेलीफोनी। उसके बाद वो आजो द्योबा मेरे को कहती क्या चक्कर क्या है कि यहाँ लोगों के पास स्मार्टफोन नहीं है। बात कर रहे हैं, मैं आई एम बीइंग वेरी वेरी स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड। मैं ये कई बार बोलता हूँ, मुनि जी ने मुझे रिसेंटली कहीं सुना था, सर ये रियलिटी, अभी हमारी क्षमताएं नहीं, इसलिए ये चीजें जरा समझ नहीं। अच्छा अब सर लेट्स कम टू समथिंग मोर मजेदार। नेपाल में इलेक्शन हो रही है सर, ये देखने लायक चीज है। अब ये हिस्ट्री तो जो हो गया, वी हैव टू लर्न टू लिव विद। वहां इलेक्शन हो रही, पिछली इलेक्शन के बाद बहुत स्थिरता की सरकार आ गई, नियरली 2/3 गवर्नमेंट। देखिए उन्होंने क्या कर दिया सर, ये रेंट सीकिंग की हद से भी क्रॉस कर दी, जो ऐसा ही हरकत की जिसको हम ना रिवर्स कर सकते हैं ना वो रिवर्स कर सकते हैं, और ये चुभेगी नहीं, ये लीगल इम्पेडिमेंट का साला डाल दिया सर। इतनी जबरदस्त बात ये जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में ला दी। We have some solutions, but they are half clever solutions. मैं तो बहुत मानता हूँ कि अगर नेपाल में ऐसी वैसी सरकार रही जो 8-9 महीने में इधर से थोड़ा उधर से थोड़े, हमें भी कुछ ना कुछ ऑप्शंस रहेंगी, क्योंकि वो जो दूसरे लोग हैं ना सर, चाहे द वेस्ट चाहे द चाइनीज, उनकी abilities at this rent seeking society is tremendous. We don't have those abilities. We don't have them. Second point I want to make to everyone is, sir, ये इलेक्शन में क्या होगा? I hope उथल पुथल ही रहे, कोई ऐसा कोई बात नहीं। लगता तो है कि द्योबा जी और प्रचंड कुछ ना कुछ जीत जाएंगे, लेकिन the combination of Prachand and Dyoba is exactly similar to the combination of Oli and Prachand, and this will lead very soon to all kinds of problems because the man who wins less will demand more. Now, Ranjit was there recently, and I'm sure has the best barometer of what exactly is happening there. Secondly, sir, for the first time, a large number of third front characters are being fielded in Nepal. This is really these westernized kind of characters. काठमांडू में इलेक्शन हुई सर, एक आदमी जीत गया जिसको किसी ने नाम निशान नहीं पूछा था। जीत, काठमांडू इज द लार्जेस्ट सिटी, इट्स 25% ऑफ नेपाल पॉपुलेशन, वो जीत गया। अब आप उसको जो मर्जी कहिए, ये वो हमारी सपोर्ट से नहीं जीता, ना चाइनीज की सपोर्ट नहीं, गोरों की सपोर्ट। ये फैक्ट, ये चीजें जरा थोड़ी सी समझ जानी चाहिए। आई से दीज थिंग्स वेरी स्ट्रांगली एंड वेरी मच। Nepal is not the country that we understand Nepal to be, or the way we internalize things in our own thinking. But I want to leave another thought with you on elections. Sir, ये election तो पता नहीं क्या होगा या नहीं होगा, इसमें भी सुनिएगा। Oli ji, one side says, doing well, he'll be able to play up the anti-India card, but he's not looking very strong physically. There have been reports of his, being the only man running for the Communist Party, having a lot of problems. The Nepali Congress and its Gathbandhan seem strong. But on the other hand, the fact that you have 3 leaders or 1 + 1 + 2 other leaders, what it means after that, nobody knows. Remember, Mr. Dyoba is also hell-bent on seeing his wife succeed him, something which the Nepali Congress, I'm sure, internally finds a complete anathema to their way of thinking. But, this is the realities of life. And she's the person who pulls all the strings behind the show. These are realities. But I want to leave with everyone another thought. This perhaps is not the most important election. The most important election is the election that will happen in February, March, or wherever then, for the president of Nepal. Now, the president is technically a titular person, but has a few residual powers. Sir, jitni Oli ji ne, jin cheezon ko hum jo bhi unko harkatein kahein, jo bhi kahein, all those were possible because the president played ball with it. If the president plays the other way around, and therefore that election will be an important one for looking at the way things work out. Many of us recall things that happened many years back in the role of the president. But, if I leave the constructive role of the president out, the not so constructive elements of what the presidency can do was in display in the last 5 years, without any doubt whatsoever. And so these are things that are particularly important. I can have no objection at all to ideas that Vesa Muni, I only heard him, I didn't hear Ranjit, mention about building connectivity, building trade, building relations. Let me make a point, sir. Nepal has always been among the top 10 export destinations from India. But I am willing to, say quite categorically that if you include the amount that goes over informally, and let's not use words such as smuggling, etc., it would be in all probability among the top 5 export destinations.
Oh.
Yes, sir. These are facts. Sir, our exports to UAE, USA, etc., are for goods are in the region of some $30-odd billion, $33-34 billion. नेपाल में हम 7-8 बिलियन करते हैं, और अगर ये आप थोड़ा सा और कर दें तो वो 10 हो जाए। ये रियलिटीज है सर, और हम यहाँ पर उनको फॉर ग्रांटेड लेके घूमी जा रहे हैं। सर, आप अगर ग्लोबल स्केल पे जा रहे हैं ना, that you're becoming the largest country in the world, top 4-5 economies in the world, you want to play a hegemonistic role. First question is, एक्सरसाइज अपने एरिया में कर पाते हो? अगर नहीं कर पाते, कम से कम डिट्रैक्शन तो नहीं हो रही, ये देखना है। सर, मैं चुप रहता हूँ, मेरे को बहुत कुछ कहना है हर सब्जेक्ट पे। आप सब लोगों को हंसाऊंगा भी, और आई एम ग्लैड आप भी हंस रहे हैं। थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर दिस अपॉर्चुनिटी।
Okay, Manjeev, I am so glad that with the kind of candor which we have in discussion. You see, you can't have this candid discussion, ICW or IDSA. It can happen only by. Now, let me clarify, Manjeev, you referred to why I'm doing UPI. Look, you surprised, no, I launched this organization 2.5 years back. And thanks to COVID, we couldn't do a single discussion so far. But having discussions and relations in neighborhood is one of the part of this international UPF. Now, what happened? 3 of our advisors died thanks to COVID. 3 of our other persons who support the died. So we should start actually virtually, then we'll move to the physical one. No, you have raised so many points and both sides have to digest what you've said. And as we have very limited number of audience, actually, I think the panelists and the audience is 50-50. So I will that now. Let me give 2 minutes each of you to give in 2 minutes. What are 3 things you can practical step, measure, policy decisions we can really take, which can really take care of some of the issues which you have mentioned and Professor Muni has mentioned. So we start with Professor Muni. Professor Muni, can you suggest 3 concrete measures which India can take, which can really give a boost to our relations? Over to you.
Well,
Yes, please.
I don't know whether one can concretely say only 3 things. One is that we must improve our delivery deficit. I'm very clear about it. I mean, whatever else it is. I have a slight disagreement with Manjeev when he says that instability is good for us. This is a typically imperial attitude that let them fight, so we will make our gains about it. We have not succeeded. We have done this. All 70 years, this is what we have done. But it has not helped us in any way. So that is a no for me. But we may disagree. He knows much more about Nepal than I do. But this is first. Secondly, he said very rightly, we take Nepal for granted. Don't do that. There's a lot of complacency in the policy making. अरे नेपाल नाराज होगा, सुधार लेंगे, कोई बात नहीं, दबा देंगे, कोई बात नहीं, डरा देंगे, कोई बात नहीं, नहीं होगा. Therefore, leave apart your complacency, and I think start respecting the wishes of the people there. It's a new Nepal. It's a different Nepal. It's an aspiring Nepal, which wants you to contribute. Now, Manjeet again rightly said that there is a lot of informal help which goes from India. You're right there, but it doesn't make political impact. The Chinese help makes political impact. We have not taken any major project for the last 40 years. Any major developmental project except hydropower. Yes, you are talking about. But no major developmental project, hydropower, they think it is in India's interest.
True.
And they say India does not want to share power with us. India wants to take our water. This is their perception. We can go into details about it. Therefore, on some of these things, if we can improve our performance, probably it would be better.
Okay. Now over to Professor Kondapalli. You have your president in China, Xi Jinping, is stronger and new powers and new historical role for himself. Do you think Chinese incursion, or let's say Chinese activities in Nepal, will be intensified? And as you were saying, they want to create a leftist government and want to make inroads, deeper inroads. Can you suggest something which we can counter? You have Confucius Center, but we can have so many centers. There's no dearth of ideas. If you have Pasupatinath's temple there, what can be bigger symbolic connecting point? Yes, Professor Kondapalli.
I think, with the 20th Party Congress winding up today, Xi Jinping, as it was done in the 19th Party Congress, he had reiterated the position that China wants to occupy the center stage, which basically means that they want to displace the United States or any other, regional powers or others. So, a clear message from the 20th Party Congress, and with the kind of support that Xi Jinping received from the Communist Party members, it suggests that the centralization of powers, and of course, Wang Yi continues to become he will replace Yang Jiechi, who is currently the political counselor, which basically means he is the head of the foreign affairs. So Wang Yi this March visited Kathmandu and warned the Nepalese about U.S. relations. So my hunch is this line will continue, and China is going to give a big company to India in Nepal, not just to India but also to the United States. And when countries cross the Chinese line, they draw down heavily. And this is what I would see in China in the short term, in the next 2 to 3 years' time. Second is, in the light of this, I think what India needs to do is focus on deliverables, focus on infrastructure projects with private partnership, public-private partnership. I think that is one area where we can, retain our goodwill in Nepal. The third I would suggest is to look at the Tibet factor in a much more concrete manner, especially in terms of democratization of the Tibetan diaspora and Tibetan. This is the key problem for China in Nepal. And that is where we need to also look at this aspect. So from a basically regional security perspective, India needs to address China in Nepal.
Okay, now coming back to you, Manjeet, you gave so many points. Now come to some concrete thing. What can you suggest which we should be doing? Talk about soft power. Is Bollywood not popular Kathmandu after Devanand has fought entire jewel thief and there, you remember? And I don't know whether current crop of Indian idols of Bollywood are not popular in Kathmandu. I mean, please suggest 3-4 things which India can do.
Sir, I'd be happy to suggest. जरा ये सोचिएगा सर, नेपाल में कॉन्टेस्टेशन नेपाल, चाइना और यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स का हो रहा है और हम वहां पर क्या बैठे होंगे, ये क्या कर रहे हैं हम लोग, ये चीज समझ जाइए सर, ये सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट चीज. सेकेंड पॉइंट आई वांट टू मेक यू सर, बॉलीवुड ऑफ कोर्स पॉपुलर है, हर आदमी देखता है फिल्में, लेकिन वो समझते हैं अपनी जेब में रखे हुए, बट दे आर मूविंग सर, दे आर मूविंग. You'd be surprised, साउथ कोरियन सोप्स, ब्राजीलियन सोप्स उनके टीवी में हमारे यहाँ काट देते हैं. IFA wanted to do its awards function there. My God, इतनी मुश्किलों से उनको मनाया कि भाई यहाँ से दबा हो जाओ, यहाँ पर राइट हो जाएगी, आपको कुछ नहीं मिलेगा. सर ऋतिक रोशन याद रखिएगा सर, वो ना इंडिया की चीजें जेब में रखिए और आगे चले. हमें कुछ ना कुछ वहां करने की जरूरत है, जो आम आदमी लोगों के साथ रोजमर्रा के साथ कुछ ना कुछ अच्छा करें, ताकि द सिचुएशन रिमेन्स till we become a much more powerful nation and being able to do more things, which is today not the case. I'll make 3 specific suggestions. One is develop your border areas. आपने कहा ना ये यूपी का फाउंडेशन है, सर मैं तो आप मुख्यमंत्री जी से एक बार नहीं 10 बार कहा, आपके जो बॉर्डर एरियाज हैं उनकी हालत देखिए. द सड़क इवन इन नेपाल इज 5 लेन और आपके यहाँ सीधा ही सड़क खड्डों में आदमी चढ़ जाता है. आप वहां पर मॉल्स डेवलप करिए, आप वहां पर बढ़िया बढ़िया चीजें करें, एंड फॉरगेट दिस हॉस्पिटल एंड स्कूल एंड ऑल, उनके पास सब कुछ है, वो सब चीजें आप ये चीजें करिए जो मिडिल क्लास लोगों को पसंद है. नेपाली सब मिडिल क्लास हो गए, ये फैक्ट्स, ये एक पहली चीज करिए. दूसरी, कनेक्टिविटी बढ़िया करिए. लेट्स स्टॉप बीइंग निगार्डली कि कोई हम फ्लाइट की नहीं देंगे, वो सरसावा से जा रही है, कोई ये नहीं देंगे, वो नहीं देंगे. क्या कर रहे हो सर, यू आर लूजिंग आउट. नेपालीज आर यूजिंग कतार एयरवेज, वो 5 बार दिन में जाता है कतार एयरवेज, और हमारी हालत देखो. कभी हम इधर देख रहे हैं कलकत्ता की फ्लाइट वो नहीं चल पा रही, बनारस बड़ी मुश्किलों से लोगों के हाथ जोड़ के खुलवाई थी, वो बंद हो गई है, पटना की कभी है ही नहीं. क्या कर रहे हैं हम सर, थोड़ा सा खुले दिल से करिए. स्टॉप दिस होल बिजनेस ऑफ लुकिंग एट दीज थिंग्स. थर्डली, कनेक्टिविटी ऑन अ डिफरेंट प्लेन. सर हमारी ट्रेन लाइन जो 1947 में हर बॉर्डर टाउन ऑफ नेपाल में लगती थी, हमने सारी उखाड़ दी. क्या कर रहे हैं, आगे नेपाल क्या करता है, उनकी सड़कें ठीक हो जाएंगी सर, कुछ हमारे पैसे से, कुछ चाइनीज पैसे से, कुछ अपने पैसे से, ADB का ये वो लगाए, वो सब ठीक हो जाएगा. आप अपनी ट्रेन बनाइएगा अप टू देयर बॉर्डर एंड डोंट वेस्ट टाइम ऑन बिल्डिंग इवन 1 किलोमीटर इनटू देयर बॉर्डर, क्योंकि वो आपको इतना चकाचौंध करेंगे कि आपको समझ ही आएगी कि क्या हुआ. एंड दे आर पास्ट मास्टर्स दैट दे हैव लिटिल इंटरेस्ट in your succeeding. Remember that. But you have to succeed. There is no go for that. Thank you.
Okay, coming back to Ranjit, we begin with you and we end with you. Now you have heard your colleagues and co-panelists and they have given a lot of food for thought. And I think you also had almost 1 hour to listen to them. So coming back to you, I mean, do you want to comment to any of their comment and also give 3-4 concrete suggestions which can really give boost to India-Nepal relations?
No, I agree with what all our colleagues have said. And I just want to say 2 or 3 things. One, I think, our goal should be to create a situation where Nepal, Nepalese elites, Nepalese people have a vested interest in the India growth story, that they benefit from India's growth. And to that extent, to that end, we need to have this common market, and not just India, Nepal, but in our sub-region, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and there should be no barriers, restrictions. And I think the best way to achieve this is what is already happening in the energy sector. I think this is going to be a game changer. Already you can see it in Nepal. And once this Satluj project comes on stream, I don't know what's happening to Pancheshwar. Somehow, everyone seems to be dragging their feet. But once these projects come on stream, it's going to be a real game changer. And I think the positive economic relationship will impact on the political relation. Point number 1. Point number 2, we have to engage with everybody, with all political leaders. And as Manjeev often says, with the aspirational generation. There's a new generation with new opportunities. They go all over the world. So this Gen Next is what we have to target. And I know some programs have begun because recently in Delhi, we had a delegation of Gen Next people who came and met me. And, it's young people brimming with ideas. They don't have the historical baggage of the relationship. This we have to target. And when I say engage, of course, with all political parties, media, the whole gamut of things. And we cannot afford to be a silent spectator. And I fully agree with Manjeev that, right now we seem to feel that China and US are fighting it out and it's good for India. I mean, I feel it's disastrous because in a sense, we are ceding political space in that country because, other countries are coming in, stepping in a very big way, and it's going to be very difficult in the future. So this is something that we really need to be concerned about, cautious about. And so we have to step up our act. As Professor Muni says, this delivery deficit should end. And I feel it is ending. It's not, yes, there were problems in the past, but a lot of measures are now being taken to improve delivery. And you can see, it's not all a very negative picture. A lot of things are happening, positive things are happening. So I feel that, if we go in this direction in the future, we will be in a good place in the relationship.
Okay, tell me, we have claimed to be second or third largest startup center in India. Are the young startup Indians are not interested in having something in Nepal?
So I think this is what we have to facilitate. We have to bring our young Indian startups, also, programs like Skill India, and sort of include Nepali Gen Next, young Nepalis into these projects. I mean, with the skilling projects, what we have in India, we can start in Nepal. It's not so difficult to do it. And similarly, these IT companies, I mean, the Nepalese are bright people. The youngsters, they're like youngsters over here. So we must facilitate this.
Okay.
Can I just say something to you one sec, sir?
Yeah.
Sir, नेपाल में startups बहुत सारे हैं और वो India startups के साथ बहुत deal करते हैं. There are Nepali colonies in Bangalore and Hyderabad. They are working. सर हमें पता ही नहीं चलता कि नेपाली है वहाँ. आपको पता ही नहीं चलता सर, ये reality है लाइफ की, और वो यहाँ बताते नहीं है. क्यों बताए? कोई पूछता नहीं है और पूछना भी नहीं चाहिए. Rightly so. सर कंपनियों के CEO लगे हुए हैं, बड़ी बड़ी जगहों में लगे हुए, मिनिस्टरों के दफ्तरों में घूम रहे हैं सर. ये नॉर्मल है. हमारे स्टार्टअप्स ये लोग काम करते हैं, लेकिन सर आई डोंट थिंक हमें अपने प्रोग्राम इतने ज्यादा ये सब नहीं, वो काफी आगे बढ़ गया कंट्री सर, ये याद रखिए.
Okay, now let me involve some of our guests who are really showing patience to be here. This question answer session can't be. I will invite by name. I see my friend General Dipankar Banerjee. Are you still there? General Banerjee. General Dipankar Banerjee, are you there?
नहीं सर,
उनका नाम तो आ रहा है यहाँ पे. Okay, I have Haran there. Haran, do you want to comment on anything? You have been sitting in Bhutan for some time.
Yes, yes.
So please, I invite you, Haran, to make some comments.
Okay, thank you very much. I've listened carefully to the 4 presentations. They were very informative and excellent. I thank them all for that. I have a couple of small questions. Ranjit mentioned about Pancheshwar project, 5,000 megawatt Pancheshwar project. Now the project is being talked about for the last 25 years. Has there been any recent movement forward which sort of can give rise to optimism on this front, whether it is going to happen? Because even after it starts, I think it will take about 8 to 10 years to complete the project. Second is about the status of MCC projects. Are they going ahead full steam? Are they going full steam ahead, or are they also stuck up like some of the Indian projects there? And one particular point made by Mr. Muni is worth noting. He talked about delivery deficit. I agree with him that there is delivery deficit, and as Ranjit pointed out, that there has been some forward movement on many of the projects now. I agree with him also. But one issue that he made, one point he made, that is Professor Muni, he said it is inherent in Government of India's decision making or some such thing. I mean, not the exact word, but he made this. I am not sure whether I'll agree with him on that. I would like him to explain explain what he meant by that. Thank you.
Okay, so I think both Manjeev and Professor Muni, I think Haran has raised some queries about the presentation. So over to you, Manjeev, then to Professor Muni.
Haran, thank you very much. I can tell you about Pancheshwar at the time that I was there. A great deal of effort was made to try and push it. There was a wonderful Secretary, Water Affairs here who was keen. Then he retired. The next person was also keen. The Foreign Ministry was keen. But, look, it needs a sustained degree of interest on our part. Please understand what Professor Muni had said, what Ranjit had also mentioned. Those chaps are willing to, let me say, cut their nose if it spites your face. My understanding on Pancheshwar is a little different from most people. I think we need Pancheshwar no longer for the electric power that it's going to give. We need it because we need water. And we need water desperately in the city of Delhi. Therefore, believe me, I believe we need to be more generous than what we have been. We need it. But I'll stop at that. It's now 3 years since I was there, not very familiar with what else has happened. Professor Muni, the rest is for you, sir.
Over to you, Professor Muni.
Well, I don't think I have to react to him. He said, I agree with Ranjit also that there are efforts being made to put mechanisms which can reduce the delivery deficit. But the problem remains. And there are many projects which are still lingering on, and the Nepalese, when you talk to them, they point to those projects, not the one where you are doing well. So the Nepalese also play their part, but the fact is that we are not able to deliver. There is a lack of poor coordination in the ministries. I mean, all of you know that. The MEA has, for the last few years, tried to move for better coordination. There is a mechanism, but the problem remains. I want to make one more point. There is a reference to US-China competition in Nepal. I think the basic competition is between India and China, to my mind. The problem is that India has now got convinced that it cannot meet the Chinese in Nepal. And therefore, we are inviting other powers to share our strategic space. We have been pleading with the Nepalese to approve the MCC of the US. We want US there. We want Japan there. Now, if that shows complete lack of confidence in us in dealing with the situation posed by the Chinese.
Okay, now I see my friend Rajit Mitra sitting there. Are you there, Rajit?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Do you have any question or comment?
I just want to take up on Ranjit's talk about this electricity export from Nepal. Has it already started going to Bangladesh, or this is the plan? And is there any plan under BBIN or anything like that to link the 4 grids so that eventually it becomes that you can buy and sell electricity literally on the spot market? That was the vision originally. What is the current situation?
Ranjit.
Yeah, thank you, Rajit. There was a vision statement that was signed by Prime Ministers Deuba and Modi a couple of months ago, and that opens the possibility for this sub-regional trade where Nepal can sell electricity to Bangladesh through India and paying wheeling charges for our transmission lines. Yeah. And Bangladesh and Nepal have already signed an agreement that Bangladesh will buy some X number of megawatts from Nepal. And so has GMR. This is an Indian company doing one of the, there's a 900 megawatt Upper Karnali project. They have also signed an agreement with Bangladesh. So I think what now needs to be done is that the nuts and bolts have to be tied up. And perhaps if the energy secretaries of these 3 countries, or also including Bhutan, meet, this could be done. As to the infrastructure, transmission lines already exist between India and each of these countries because we are buying and selling bilaterally. So you have the basic framework, you have the political decision. I think now the nuts and bolts has to be worked out by our electricity authorities and the energy officials. On Pancheshwar, I just want to say I understand a lot is happening, a lot of meetings, and most differences have been resolved. The biggest issue remains to the sharing of the augmented water once the Pancheshwar Dam is created. So this augmented water sharing between India and Nepal is a big issue. As Manjeet said, it's about water. So water is certainly one of the factors. And I think this needs a political decision. It can't be done at the level of technical experts. So the fact that the 2 prime ministers back to back in April and May emphasized Pancheshwar means that there is a political will to go forward. And I hope, this can be resolved. As to the MCC projects, this is a time-bound thing. Within 5 years from the date of signature or ratification, this project will be completed. So I know that there is an office, etc., that has been established. And I presume that work is ongoing on this project. I really don't have the details about what exactly is happening, but my sense is that the project is going ahead.
Okay, thank you all. Big hand to all of our panelists. And what a pity. I think this has been a more solid, substantive discussion. You all have really given so much food for thought. I wish somehow whatever we have said here really is heard in South Block in the corridors of power, and they take note of very, very candid and very positive and constructive suggestions. I wish you all a very happy Diwali, and thank you very much for joining. The eve of Diwali is not a good time to have, but I am so grateful to you that you have all decided to support and come here, and hope to see you soon in future. Thank you very much. Good night. Good Diwali.
Bye.
Thank you. Happy Diwali.
Happy Diwali to you, sir. All the best. Thank you.
Bye-bye.